Well, it's time for another video. Now today we'll be talking about jigs and fixtures. When it comes to jigs, they come in very, very handy. There's no shortage of commercial jigs and fixtures that are on the market. They can do any number of things. But with that said, there are situations where there is no commercially available product for what you want to do, and then you have to make your own. So we're going to look a little bit at both kinds. We'll look at a few of the commercial jigs that you can use, and then we'll look at a few custom-made ones. And this is not going to be a jig class. I'm not going to show you how to make jigs. What I'm going to try to communicate to you is how useful they can be and how they can do things for you a lot quicker and a lot more precisely when you use a jig or a fixture. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. Now we'll take a look first at jigs that are specifically made for a table saw. When you're trying to put a jig on a table saw, the manufacturer and their infinite wisdom have given you two miter slots. Now these slots are designed to carry jigs and fixtures to help you make more accurate cuts, more precise cuts, and give you repeatability in a cut. So the first one that you would look at, and this is called a miter gauge, and it goes in a miter slot. Now the miter gauge comes with every table saw that's sold, and it simply goes into the miter slot and slides. It's adjustable, so you can change the angle on the miter gauge to change the angle on the cut that you want to make. Now it's a very simple device. There's a couple of downsides to it. Almost all of them have some play in it. As you can see, this is moving from side to side. Now if you put an angle on here and this moves from side to side, it's going to change the angle slightly, but it's still going to change it. Now for a lot of people and a lot of cuts, it's no big deal. I prefer a little bit more precision than this, and that's why I use a lot of jigs that I've made myself where there is no play in the way it fits into the miter slot. So that's your basic miter gauge. There's 100 different miter gauges that are on the market that are aftermarket. This is one that I have. We have the same one at the school. It's essentially the same. If you loosen this, it will change. And you can go anywhere from a 90-degree cut to a 45. Now, it has small indentations, and then it has a pointed arm right here. So when you engage this small arm into the indent in the circle, you can get a lot more precise angles, and you get a lot better repeatability, because when this arm goes into a detent, it's going to be exactly the same every time, and then you just tighten it down and you have a good cut. This has mechanisms in it where you can tighten up the fit so it doesn't have the wiggle that most factory miter gauges come with. But this does wear, and it has to be adjusted from time to time to maintain that tight fit. This also has built-in stops. You have two of them that you can put down either one of them. They're adjustable here, so you can slide this up and down, and you have a tape measure on the face of it, so you can see where you're setting it. And if you wanted to make an angle cut, you would simply put your block up against the stop, hold that, run it through the blade, and if you're making 50 of them, all 50 of them are going to be exactly the same length because they're going against the same stop. And that's adjustable for the whole length of the arm. So these are incredibly useful jigs. And again, there's no shortage of them on the market. And when you're done, it's very, very easy to set that back to 0, so you're back to cutting a 90 degree. These are the only two that I'll show you today that were factory made. What we're going to do is take a look at a few custom jigs and fixtures that fit not only the table saw but the band saw. You can make them to fit a drill press. You can make these jigs to fit any piece of equipment in the shop, and we'll look at those in just a moment. Now, when it comes to custom jigs and fixtures, they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and applications. This particular one is designed to cut 45 degree miters. It's designed a little bit differently than most. You would put your piece in here, lock it down, and you would make your first cut and put your 45 here. Then you would loosen this one, you would take it and run the extra length up through here, put this down on the length that you want, and lock it down, and then make your second cut. This is exactly 90 degrees, and when you put a face here and cut it, and put it over here and cut the other miter, then it's automatically going to equal 90 degrees. Even if this is off just a little bit, it will still equal 90 degrees because this piece is cut at 90 degrees. And it's a very useful tool. It goes into the table saw it utilizes both of the miter slots, which gives you a lot more stability. It's less likely to wobble on you if you utilize both of the miter slots. And this particular one is adjustable. So when it begins to wear and it gets a little loose, I can tighten it up. This one is for cutting 3/8 inch finger joints. And it's made the same way. It has the dual runners that go in the miter slots. It has a peg on it that enables you to cut exactly the same width tail on the finger joint. And it gives you the opportunity, well, the ability to cut these finger joints quickly and precisely, so that you don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to fit together. And it's a finger joint, so the pieces go like that to form the corner. And this jig works very, very well. They don't have to be fancy. They can be like this one. And I use this in the turning class to cut the angles for a doorstop that we make. It isn't very pretty, it's not fancy, but it's effective and it gets the job done. They can be incredibly specific. This one cuts a 36-degree angle. And again, it's made the same way. It has the dual runners. But all this jig does is cut a 36-degree angle. There's a project that I do that requires a 36-degree angle. I make enough of them to where it's worth it to spend the time to build a jig like this. And again, not all jigs and fixtures go on table saws. This one goes on a bandsaw. I use this in my lathe work. I can take a chuck off my lathe and I can screw it onto here, cut a piece off square while it's still on the chuck. Then I just screw the piece and the chuck on here, make my adjustments, and when this slides through using the miter slot on the bandsaw, it gives me a precise cut. So this jig is used on a bandsaw. Now, I do a lot of lathe work, and I do a lot of very specific work on a lathe. I make a lot of pieces that are actually magic tricks that are sold to collectors. And this is one of the jigs that I made. It's threaded on this end into the wood, and this screws onto the headstock on my lathe. And then I put the piece that I'm trying to do work on. It's a very small, very thin, delicate piece. And I put it in here, I tighten it up with a nut driver, and then that holds the piece while it's spinning, and I can do the delicate work on the inside of it. And that fits on a lathe. There are other jigs that don't actually fit on a tool at all. I also make musical instruments. This particular jig locates all of the holes on that musical instrument for the hitch pins and the tuning pins. And there's holes in the center that locate the sound holes that I cut out of the soundboard and the bottom. But it's just a jig that clamps directly onto either the bottom of the instrument or the soundboard, and it marks all of the holes. I just put a transfer punch in each hole, and that leaves me a center punch where I need to drill. So it's a very quick way to locate a lot of holes. And it gives me repeatability. Every time I clamp this onto the top or bottom of the instrument, these holes are going in exactly the same place on each piece. So I have the repeatability that I need. So there's not a whole lot more that we will cover in this video. I just wanted to give you a little introduction to jigs. We're not going to build any jigs in this class, but as you progress in your in the craft of woodworking, there's going to come a time when you're going to need a jig. And this just gives you an introduction to some of the possibilities. And that's about it for now. We will see you another day in another video.